Welcome, participants. Good morning, and here's wishing you all a Merry Christmas. Whilst in 2020, we have preached and practiced social distancing, more appropriately said physical distancing, if we look at it closely, the geographical boundaries have collapsed during this period as we switch to the digital way of life. Or I can say the physical distances really don't matter much. I recollect in 2019, we used to organize face-to-face trainings. Perhaps the thought was, let's have separate trainings organized in Delhi and NCR for the ease of participants. Today, we talk of webinars where all can join together. There's some problem. I think I'm getting chanchal, sorry. So today we talk of webinars where all can join together, though we long for face-to-face trainings. Now we have our presidents of IA Delhi Chapter 4 Audit Clubs organize a common webinar for all. We have Sumit Bahadurji, President Bhilai Audit Club representing Chhattisgarh, Mohit Gupta, President Lucknow Audit Club representing Uttar Pradesh, Sameer Mittal, President Ludhiana Audit Club representing Punjab, and Sana Bakai, President Jaipur Audit Club representing Rajasthan. The digital way has enabled us expand our footprints together. In a while, we will hear a similar story on internal audit journey from Dexterous to digital from our distinguished speaker, Mohit Gupta, President Lucknow Audit Club. But before that, I would request the presidents of the 4 audit clubs to share a few words. Firstly, I invite Sumit Bahadurji to say a few words. Sumitji, over to you.
Thank you, Siddheshwarji. Good morning and Merry Christmas to all. All the participants are welcome on behalf of Bhilai Audit Club. And today we have a very good seminar on internal audit and how it goes with the digital, which is a big challenge for us. So without much time, I would request to Mohitji to take over. Mohit,
Thank you so much, Sumitji. Thanks a lot. Now I invite Sameer to say a few words. Sameer, if you could just share your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Sumitji. First of all, Merry Christmas to all and happy holidays for the upcoming New Year. I hope everybody is keeping safe and keeping well. So enjoy safely and take care of yourself. So it's a wonderful topic and a wonderful initiative taken by IA Delhi chapter to organize a joint session by all the IA audit clubs, and I think so what we are targeting from today onwards for next few months is like to guide all of you from a basics wherein audit clubs have been made to promote internal audit education at a local level in various cities, considering Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Punjab, and UP, Lucknow. So from that perspective, so the initiative is to guide you and to sail you through that how and what are the practices that is going to happen. And considering that this thing in mind and the thought in mind, so we have taken the first topic wherein Mohit has kindly agreed. So I wish you all the best, and I request you to participate, and whatever questions you have, please do ask in the Q&A session, and we continue to stay in touch. Thank you. Over to you, Sid.
Thanks a lot, Sameer. Now I request the only lady on the screen, Sana, to share a few words.
Good morning, everyone, and wish you all a Merry Christmas. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you all to the Internal Audit webinar series organized in a collaborative way by presidents of all the 4 audit clubs of IAA Delhi chapter. I remember just 2 months back, we launched this Jaipur Audit Club while we were in the grip of pandemic. And this is the first session for the Jaipur Audit Club members, and it gives me a proud feeling to have organized this in a collaborative way. And I'm confident that all of you will enjoy this session as we walk through the journey of internal audit from Dexterous to digital. Over to you, Sid.
Thanks, Sana. Mohit, I know you will be taking the technical session, but before that, as a capacity of the president of Lucknow Audit Club, if you can share your thoughts, yeah. You're on mute, Mohit.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you for letting me know. And thank you so much for that warm welcome. And thank you, Nikhil sir. Thank you, everyone, all the president colleagues And many thanks to all the participants for sparing time on this lovely Friday morning to attend this first in the series, that the webinar that we are going to organize jointly through all audit clubs. And I believe this is not just a coincidence, but the blessings of the Almighty. And I remember that we had our first event of the Lucknow Club organized on the occasion of Ganesh Chaturthi. And now we have this next event organized on the auspicious occasion of Christmas as well as Tulsi Divas. So wish you all a Merry Christmas and Tulsi Divas ki bahut bahut shubhkamnaएं, and looking forward for the session today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohit. Ladies and gentlemen, now I request Mr. Nikhil Kochar, Chief Advisor, the Institute of Internal Auditors India, to share his perspective and introduce today's speaker for the technical session. Nikhil sir, over to you.
Thank you, Sid. So, a good morning to everyone, and Mr. Siddeshwar Bhalla, President of the Delhi chapter, Sumit from Bhilai, Sameer from Ludhiana, Mohit from Lucknow, and Sana from the Jaipur chapter. It's really Jaipur club, sorry. It's really a privilege to be here today amongst all of you and to see all my friends here on the screen. Taking forth new initiatives as far as this is concerned, the training of our members and the imparting and sharing of knowledge. Like everyone has said, I think it's the festive season, so my best wishes to all of you for the festive season, and a fervent wish that 2021 would be a lot better for all of us than 2020. Although despite I would say the hard knocks that 2020 has given most of us, there have also been, I think, a lot of learnings, and perhaps today's subject is something that also is going to be covering that how do we move from being dexterous to digital from the sphere of internal audit. Just in order to set the context, I'll take a few minutes of your time. Basically, when we started off, or rather when I started off my internal audit journey, perhaps a little before some of you were born, or many of you were born, internal audit and statutory audit, frankly, did not have too much of a difference. All one was doing, as most internal auditors, was looking at cash vouchers, looking at journal vouchers, saying that something is outstanding for more than 30 days or 60 days, etc., etc. But when we got into internal audit, what I also found was the level of knowledge about internal audit was fairly rudimentary. But as time has passed, what we started doing is we started looking even within the 80s at different aspects of management operations, different aspects of plant functioning. And I would say that by the end of the 80s, at least in the firm I was associated with, we had about 40-50 areas on which we could do independent internal audits. I'm just sharing my personal journey with you so that in case there are any tips for any of you in that, it would be nice. When the 90s started, we started getting more involved in looking at understanding and documenting systems and processes, preparing systems and procedural manuals. And by the time we came into the early 2000s, one also started looking at risk management and risk management frameworks, internal control frameworks, which again is something which is applicable. But today, if you see, the entire pressure of internal audit has become a lot more. You have data, you have technology, you have risk, you have cyber related issues, and also the expectations of shareholders have gone up multifold. So as our president and CEO of IIA Inc. says, Richard Chambers, that the internal audit profession has had to start evolving, where earlier we had hindsight and we provided hindsight, the post-mortems which we were doing when we were doing internal audits almost like statutory audits, to insight. I mean, were we able to cut through the red tape? Were we able to cut through all the verbose figures which were available? Were we able to deliver insight to the management? And today's issue and expectation is that are we also able to provide foresight? The stakeholders today have higher expectations from us. regardless of whether it's the management, whether it's the board, whether it's the audit committees, whether it is the regulators, and today, last but not the least, also the shareholders. We have an onus, we have an obligation that we have to perform to these expectations in an environment where change is not become a constant. Change is actually accelerating on a day-to-day basis. What are the solutions? I think all of this sounds a little tough, but I think the first thing is we have to shake ourselves and move out of, the complacency in case any of it is still left with you. I think most of us have already been shaken out of complacency during the last 1 year. But if any of you have not, all I can request you is please shake yourself out of your complacency. Change is going to continue to accelerate, and what you have to see is, are you ready for it? Please do work on enhancing your skill sets, because today internal auditors are expected to have the knowledge, skills, and competencies which are required in order to do a good internal audit. Invest in training. Certainly, I think all of you or most of you who are members of the IIA are already doing that, and I'm sure if you continue to do that, you will find it's going to reap a lot of benefits as far as your professional capabilities and competencies is concerned. I was actually shocked when I was attending a seminar in January last year, and I asked the audience, I was also one of the panelists, I asked the audience, how many of you are using data analytics? There were 200 people in that 5-star hotel hall. I think one person or two people raised their hands and said, we are using data analytics. And this was a seminar on internal audit. So if you have not adopted it, don't think that you are in the minority. But what I can assure you is that if you don't adopt it, you definitely will be in the minority very, very soon. So get comfortable with technology. Listen to the Mohit Guptas and the Sid Bhallas of the world who are telling you how to adopt digital, how to become more dexterous with technology. Keep in touch with the latest changes, because as someone has really said, I don't know whether you've heard of the poet philosopher Rumi, so I will quote him. He said, yesterday I was clever. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. Please understand that it is you who can change yourself, and you who can make yourself more applicable, more relevant to the world and the expectations which today's stakeholders have from internal audit. After this, I would request Mohit to take over from here. But before that, if you permit, I'll spend 2 minutes introducing our August speaker for today. Mohit is a director with Mazars. He has been specializing in internal audits, internal control frameworks, including SOX, IFC, risk management in large and complex internal audit assignments. Not only is he a CA, but he's also qualified in IT engineering. He's worked with several companies, well-known companies, apart from Mazars, including Deloitte, Genpact, KPMG. He's on the BOG, the Board of Governors of IIA Delhi, as well as president of the Lucknow Audit Club, as you're already aware. And he's also been co-author of a guide on risk-based internal audit planning, which has been taken out by the Institute of Chartered Accountants. So thank you very much. And over to Mohit. I will not stand between you and the session anymore. Over to you, Mohit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nikhil sir, for that warm welcome. Let me quickly open the presentation and start. Just give me a second. Hope my presentation is visible.
Yeah, it's visible, Mohit.
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we look at the agenda for the today, I have kept in a journey as if we start from the evolution of internal audit. We see what's changing around us and what's changing for the internal audit as a profession. As we move on the journey, we see that how the smart and digital internal audit can be implemented on ground while we do the audit for the organization. How do we leverage boards and the other cognitive technologies for the purpose of internal audit? yes, we are in the middle of pandemic and how we can do the effective internal audit remotely. And then, yes, while see where we have reached now today in the journey, but how does the future of internal audit looks like? But before we move ahead, I would want to say that the world is changing fast and the digital revolution is there. And any incident, whether or not in the control of the organization, can have big impacts on the organization. And accordingly, internal audit need to be able to change and modify their approach to align to the new rules of the game. And when I say the new rules of the game, first being leveraging technologies like bots, AI, and ML for the purpose of making internal audit more effectively. Secondly, upgrading your skill set in a manner where the organizations are using these technologies for making and operations more effective. How do we go and audit the processes which are now getting operated through the use of these technologies? So in the today's sessions, I will try to take you on the journey of internal audit profession so far, and then elaborate on the expectations from the internal audit of the new age, and how can we do justice with our new role from the new expectation that we have from us. I would like to start from a short video, and I'm sure that will give you a good glimpse of how the internal audit has moved so far.
Welcome to the history of audit. At Mazar, we're proud to be auditors because of the important role it plays. To understand its importance and why we do what we do, it helps to know something of the history behind audit's development. The first references to audit are around the time of the Roman Empire, some 2000 years BC. The emperors appointed bright and ambitious young men that they considered trustworthy as quaestors. The quaestors were sent to the corners of the Roman Empire to ensure the governors who ruled the provinces were spending the money that Rome had sent correctly, the assets that money had bought were protected and looked after and existed, and importantly, that the taxes the governors were due to collect and send to Rome were being collected and were being sent to Rome without the governors taking a slice off the top. So a theme starts. Somebody, in this case a ruler, appoints someone they consider trustworthy to verify financial expenditure, assets, and that there's no fraud. Moving on some 3,000 years to Henry I of England. It was Henry I who first used the word audit, which actually means to hear. Like the Roman emperors, he sent auditors to the corners of England to confirm that the barons who ruled on his behalf those areas were spending the exchequer's money as it should do, that assets again were protected, and that taxes were being collected and sent back to the king. The key development, though, that created audit as we see it today was due to the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s. For the first time, investors became part of the business process. But investors will only invest money in something they believe is safe and they understand. So they appointed people they considered trustworthy, often business associates and friends, to verify that the information being provided by the management, the people behind the potential business, was, well, to use modern terms, true and fair, something they could rely on. So there we have it. Audit today remains about this. Someone trustworthy, reporting to investors, note not companies but investors, on financial information prepared by management and whether that information is reliable or, again, to use the terms, true and fair. Of course, audits developed further. The stock market crash in the US in 1929 resulted in a lot of new regulation. From then, auditors needed to be professionals, qualified, not your friends. It also brought around a much greater focus on the profit and loss and financial reporting of performance. The development of computers and computerization enabled businesses to become truly global and truly massive. And we had to adapt our organizations and techniques to respond to this. Auditing scandals in the 1980s and 1990s brought further regulation. But one of these scandals, Enron, demonstrates the importance of being trustworthy. Enron were audited by Arthur Andersen, then the largest and most financially successful audit firm. Because one of its partners was deemed complicit in such a large accounting scandal, it lost its reputation, and so it ceased to exist overnight. It was no longer considered trustworthy. Hopefully that will enable you to understand a little bit why we at Mazars place such an importance on maintaining really high standards of integrity, independence, ethics, and technical competence. Final point, though, is that history has shown us we exist only because others, initially rulers, authorities, private individuals, and then investors, wanted us to be there. But they only want us if we are trustworthy. At Mazars, we're proud to be seen as excellent auditors because we're trustworthy, because the role is so important in the economic cycle and the operation of the world in many ways. And we're committed to keeping our standards at the very highest.
So if we look at the video, I think there's a beautiful video from Mazars, and I think when we look at the history of audit, it is not very recent. I think it goes back from the age of Roman Empire, and how over a period the expectations from the auditor has moved ahead, has enhanced significantly. And if we see the basic attributes, the key messages from the video, which all of we just saw, the integrity, being independent, being objective to the purpose for which the auditor is appointed. It has to be an ethical person, and the leadership traits that he needs to demonstrate. I think very basic. This is paramount, and however advanced the organization, the digital, everyone may become, but these are the basic pillars and the core attributes over which the auditing profession is standing today. And on the center of it is a trustworthiness. Now, if you are not trustworthy, you can't do justice to the role which an auditor is expected to play. Take an example of an Enron, which was spoken about in the video. We take an example of Satyam case, and in many of the cases, you will see even the internal audit is also being cautioned. But having said that, what is it that is changing, and what is it that we as internal auditor needs to change? I will say the entire focus boils down to technical competency. At the start, we were just expected to look at some of the expenditures, the taxes which were collected by the government, whether those are authenticated or not. As we moved ahead, the statutory audit came into the being, and where as a statutory auditor, we are expected to give our opinion on whether the financial statements are giving true and fair picture over which the investors rely upon. But as the journey moves ahead, we need to become more and more competent. The businesses have become more global, more technical, technology oriented, and hence the skill set as an auditor also needs to be enhanced to be able to justify to our role that we play as an auditor for the organization. Now, for a few minutes, I want to emphasize on focusing on what is changing for the organization. I think technology is one such piece which is reiterated in all the discussions that we have today. The consumers are tech savvy, the technology is being adopted, and there are certain statistics that you see on the screen, which I'm sure are not new. You must be hearing about these statistics in many other sessions, many other webinars. Today, we see the 4.13 billion people who are having access to the internet. 75 billion IoT connected devices are being used, and those are expected to be used by 2025. More than 6 billion global internet users are expected to be there by 2022. And if you look at the geographical spread of the internet users, I think Asia is leading. And rightly so, because this is a continent which is most populated also, and most of the users are from Asia and then Africa. They are the leading continents from the technology adoption perspective. Now, what is important? We all are aware of these facts. Now, what I want to emphasize is, as internal auditor, it is equally important that we are aware of it. And why it is important for an internal auditor? Because the world is changing. I'll give you a very classic example. I remember the days when I used to audit for a technology company, and it was in telecom space, and we were auditing the KYC process and the customer onboarding process. And it was a manual process that the user IDs, the address proof, the photographs and the KYC documents being collected by the organization. And if there are certain process lacunas, you go as an internal auditor, review the process, suggest the changes, and that gets implemented by the organization. And typically as an auditor, you have a tendency to look at the past data, look at what has gone wrong in the past, and then suggest the improvement areas for the organization. But what is more surprising, that the technology is changing the way the business is being operated. By the time your recommendations are getting implemented, the entire process itself is automated. The process itself has changed. There were the manual forms were not getting collected by the organization. It was all automated. The scanned documents come in, and it changed from a place where it was used to take 3 days for the KYC and making the number activated. It moved down to 4 hours. The moment you take up a new number, it goes to the organization. The scanned documents are seen and it is activated. And hence, as an internal auditor, we also need to see that as the organization is changing, are we looking at future? Are we also equipping ourselves, whether the process who are getting digitally changed, it is changing fast, how do we do justice to it? Another important aspect is we generally feel that the organization which are technology oriented, like telecom, IT, media, are more vulnerable and are the areas where we as an internal auditor needs to focus. And for all other organizations, we may not to be required to equip ourselves. But I think that's the myth. I think that's changed over a period. Look at the organization like Amazon. The insurance is getting sold through the online websites. Today, technology is the way of doing business for all the organization. Risk has moved from the physical cash and inventory handling to the payment gateways. And hence it is very important that we as internal auditor also equip ourselves and match pace with which the technology is changing and the consumer and the organizations are adopting the technologies. As we go ahead, and I think the COVID-19, it started, I think it's been a year, it's the anniversary we can say for the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are a lot of challenges which it has posed on all the users, consumers, organizations, and all of us are having an impact because of the COVID. But what is important, I would want to say, there are a lot of good learnings that we can take from COVID, and it has made a drastic change in the way we have perceived the risk for the organization. It has actually challenged the best of the risk management frameworks for the organizations. Now, if we see, there are certain aspects that I have presented on the slides, and we can just take one by one all of them and see why it is very important that today, as internal auditor, we need to be more agile. We need to be vigilant of what's happening on the world around us and change our audit approach in an effective manner so that we are able to do justice to what the organization we are auditing for. Now, take an example, segregation of duty and delegation of authorities. Now, today, very less workforce is operating on ground, and the people have changed their way of operations. Everyone was used to go to the offices, and now only the people who are actually dealing with the inventory, dispatches, receipt of the material, probably going to the office, but all other workforce are working remotely. And hence, the organizations may be required to compromise on certain segregation of duties. What is important that when we go as an internal auditor, do not only jump on it and just say that there is a non-compliance to segregation of duties or the standard operating processes documented by the organization, but it is very important that we appropriately evaluate the environment in which the organization is operating. What are the compensating controls over which the organization is working on, and if required, perform the substantive testing of the transactions before just concluding a non-segregation of duties. Now, that's how we need to change our audit approach. As we move ahead, we look at the internal control frameworks. I think we have said that the COVID-19 has challenged best of the frameworks. It's high time. We always say that all the internal control frameworks are dynamic in nature. We need to continuously revisit it. But we have generally seen that is a good theory. Not many organizations are able to, keep pace with it, and they have generally approached as a staggered approach, maybe once in a 3 year or once in a 5 year. They revisit all their internal control frameworks. But I think the way, the velocity with which the new age risks are impacting the organization, it is very, very important that all these internal control frameworks are revisited. Organizations need to see their risk appetite, need to revisit their risk appetite and see what are the new risks which are taking place into the best of the control framework, so that they match with the upcoming risk and the appropriate mitigating controls are implemented. Cash flows, I think that's one of the most important aspects. Every organization is impacted, so definitely it falls a place. When we look at any of the audits, I think rather than just an exposure and a transaction, we need to focus how do we improve the cash flows for the organizations, and those are the areas which are more vulnerable to the fraud as well, and as well as bring more and more efficiency and bring the ROI for the organization. As we move ahead, cyber risk, yes, as the world is moving towards digital, cyber risk is in focus. But if we look at from the COVID perspective, I think there was an FBI report which mentioned in May that the cyber risk have gone up as 800%. Today, as many as 4,000 cyber attacks are being faced by the globe every day. Now that's the gambit, that's the quantum of the cyber attacks, and hence it is very important whatever we do as an internal audit, that's become the focus. It may not be specifically the IT general control audit or the IT security audit, but whatever operations audit or the business process reviews we do, we need to see how that the process is being implemented by the organization, how vulnerable it is because of the cyber interfaces or the digital footstamps it has on it while they perform the transactions, and accordingly do justice with the role that we are expected to play to review that process. Another important aspect, the people have started working remotely. There were not much time that the organizations were able to procure, configure the devices with all best of the IT security policies and give it to all their employees. Many organizations have started with the policy of BYOD, bring your own device. So employees were given the compensation and they were supposed to just buy their devices and start working for the organization. Now just think of how vulnerable it could be for the organization. But yes, whenever you will ask business and the top management, the continuity of the operation is the paramount importance. But parallelly, we as an internal auditor needs to stand along with them and suggest, yes, while they do take any of the decision to match pace and to ensure the continuity of the operation, but what could be the top risk for them and what are the alternate ways with which they can still mitigate that risk and continue with the operations. Forex and treasury, because of the forex currency rates are fluctuating. You would have just seen that in the UK, when the new avatar of the corona is being talked about again, the stock market just crashed more than 800 points in a day. Those are the quantum and those are the velocity of the risk with which any organization is exposed to. Standard operating procedures. Yes, this is the time when the organizations needs to revisit the best of the standard operating procedures, which I'm sure that stand by the time for the couple of decades now. But considering the changes which is happening in the world around, they may be compromising or they may be deviations from the standard operating procedures. So it's a time that they need to be revisited. We as an internal auditor needs to focus on not only just looking at the compliance of the rules that were written that may be more applicable and valid for 5 years back or 10 years back, but need to suggest new of the activities, new of the process or the process changes that needs to be implemented in the SOPs. And in case the organization needs to take any deviation from the documented SOPs, what are the alternate or the compensating controls that can be implemented? And those are the areas when we have a seat on the boardroom and we are addressing the audit committees, they will really appreciate that the role we as an internal auditor are playing for them. because that is the expectation that they have from the internal auditor now. Now, the COVID-19 is just one of the examples that we talk about. Now, it could be any of the black swan. We need to see that how the best of the risk management frameworks are geared up to deal with any of the uncertain or unforeseen contingency that may expose the organization. And that's where we as an internal auditor needs to work in a more agile manner, be vigilant of what's happening around the world, and in case something comes up, something which is not perceived in advance, how do we change our approach and work as a consultant, as an advisor to the organization, and suggest them in the way so that the business are not impacted and they continue to operate and still maintain their margins and still maintains the bottom line what they are expected to. Again, the focus some point in time were only on the increasing the top line, bottom line, managing the margins, improving cash flows. But I think these kind of pandemics have forced us to rethink about the EHS, the environment around us, the people with which the organization is working. Howsoever digital we may go, none of the business can operate without the people, and the people are the backbone and the most important assets. So the safety of the people is paramount. How do we continue to operate as business without compromising on the safety of the people? I think that's an area we as an internal auditor need to see whether the organizations are also geared up to equally give importance to the safety of the people. The processes that they have implemented are best in place, or there are any recommendations that we as an auditor can suggest them to improve the safety of the people. So those are the areas that we can take up as internal auditor. Operational business performance excellence. I think that has changed. We need to see that how the business is adapting to the new rules of the game. If we are not able to gather more margins, increase top lines, the operational excellence is becoming the focus area, and hence the cost is one such piece that has always been spoken about. The management has always been asking the internal auditor to focus on the areas where they can reduce the cost. But I think the another side of the coin is the efficiency and the effectiveness with which the operations are conducted, and not necessarily that every time everything is measured in terms of cost, but definitely it has indirect impact on the cost with which the business processes are operated, and hence the excellence of the business performance and the operations is becoming the paramount importance. Take an example of a very basic example. I will say you are going to an organization and reviewing the procure to pay process, and see that the organization in the past having a trend of doing the GRN in 3 days. Now, while they do the GRN, only after that it will be available, material will be available for the purpose of production. But in area of an excellence, through our audit analytics, what are the kind of problems that we identify, why the organizations can't reduce the turnaround time of 3 days to 2 days or 2 days to 1 day, whether the organization has sufficient manpower to do it, whether the organization have implemented sufficient technology to be able to do it. And in a while I will talk about the bots or the best of the cognitive technologies the organizations are adopting these days. Is there a room for further automation that can enhance the business process and the performance excellence, and which could have a long-term impact on making the complete operations more efficient and more effective. Regulatory compliance. In a while I will talk more about this in detail, but I think whatever happens in the world around, gone are the days when the regulatories and the government were taking more than a decade to change any regulations. Now these are fast changing. The moment the COVID has come in, the lot of deadlines have got extended for the purpose of benefiting the organizations. As the businesses are going digital, the government is bringing new and new rules to dealing with that. All the e-commerce companies, the new rules are getting imposed by the organizations. Now, do we have the best of the frameworks? We as an internal auditor are visiting so many clients, so many organizations, and needs to advise the organization how they can mitigate or how they are getting aware of the recent changes that are happening in the compliances, and how they can improve their legal compliance framework to be able to ensure the compliance to those changes. Now, collectively, we say what is happening. The fraud risk has also increased a lot because of the changes that is happening in the world around us. The COVID has given, we talk about the crazy fraud triangle. the opportunity, pressure, and rationalization. I will say because of this, all these three are there, and the fraud risk is of a paramount focus. Definitely, we understand that the organization may be compromising on certain controls, but definitely not at a cost of a fraud and an opportunity being given to someone inside or to someone outside the organization. That could have a huge impacts on the organization. So that's where we need to play a role. How do we move from detective to preventive, and from preventive to proactive control, so that the organization is able to mitigate all that? And in a nutshell, I will say, because of all this, as an internal auditor, we need to have very agile approach. We need to revisit all our traditional audit programs, audit checklist, in the light of what's happening in the world around us, to be able to meet the expectation that the business has from the internal auditor. Now we have seen what's happening in the digital world, what's happening because of the pandemic, how it is impacting the organization, and how it is impacting us as an internal auditor. Now because of all this, we need to see what are the expectations, how the expectations are significantly enhanced from the internal auditor. I will say, see, it is not only the role which is changing from the internal auditor. I will say it is also the expectation, and I say the expectations are not only changing, it is enhanced significantly. See, if we look at the operations, objective, and the risk, what is changing? Technology. Technology as a way of business rather than only a support to the operation. So if we look at the initially when the businesses started adopting the technologies, the tele came into the picture, the businesses start adopting the best of the ERPs, more in the support function. How do we go about recording your financial transactions? But over a period, the business has moved from adopting the technology only from support function to the basic of doing their operations. Technology has become the way of operating. Look at the e-commerce businesses, the Amazons or the Flipkarts of the world. Their business itself is from the technology. And the large space which has come in, doing the business of technology itself. There are a lot of tech companies which has come into, they're delivering technology as a service to the organizations. Now those are the businesses which have the major market share and now, and that's where the entire operations and the entire gambit is changing. Higher proportion of white collar and the smart workforce. So gone are the days when the on ground field work people, the blue collar workforce, the labor laws, that were the organization dealing with. Now the higher proportion of the white collar and the smart workforce is there. They are more digital, they are more equipped, and that's where the organization's business processes have taken a shift. Remote working has become new normal. Not we are talking about the businesses now. This is also new normal for the auditor as well, and we need to make keep a pace with what is happening around the world. Now take an example. If the finance and accounts team or the purchase team itself is not visiting the premises of your client, how would you do the audit? What would you do by visiting to the client's office, even if you are able to do, because the COVID pandemic norms are getting normalized, and the government has also allowed that you are able to go and visit, and the business have started working as normal. But still, best of the organization has taken as a proactive measure in the safety of the people. Not everybody is going on floor. So we as an internal auditor needs to have a very agile approach. How do we move away from the physical boundaries and be able to still do the effective work working remotely? And I will deep dive on this more in the coming slides. Increasing and changing compliance requirements. I just touched upon this in the previous slide as well, but that is also one of the area which is impacting the organization fast and in a big way. GST is an example. I think all of us would be dealing with the complexities with the GST has brought to the businesses and the auditor fraternity at large. Take an example of the e-commerce organization. The government has come out with the new e-commerce rules in July, and that is asking all the buyers to collect the very pertinent information. The new regulations come in, so informations like the place of origin of the product. I'm not sure whether the China, because of the China impact it is there, but the new rules are coming in. They are enforced to put up a grievance officer to handle any of the grievance the consumer may have. Now these are some of the areas which the organizations have to deal with, and the laws are changing very fast. Now if we look at the operations are changing, we need to see how the objectives of the organizations are also changing. the organizations have become more customer centric rather than the self-obsessed and looking at the margins, the top lines and the bottom lines of the organization. They have realized that they have to become more and more customer centric to be able to remain long-term sustainability in the market. How they are able to manage deficits, that's more important. Today, not every organization may be able to run with high margins, manage huge profits, but if you are able to sustain and manage your deficits properly, then I think the business continuity will be there, and they will be able to manage the show in the long run. Managing the corruptions, I think that's also one of the aspects. Typically we have always related this word corruption with more of the PSO, the government organizations, but believe me, that's one area which is impacting all organizations in a way. Definitely we may not be using this word in that manner. When it comes to the private organization, we may call it as a fraud or any undue favor which a particular person can make because of the privilege that he enjoys as a matter of role that he's playing in the organization. But definitely an area which the organization is shifting their objective to. They are growing fast, and equally we as an internal auditor needs to keep a pace with them. Increasing social responsibility, as not only I just mentioned about not only the profits and the top line that the organizations are concerned with. If the organization do not feel socially responsible, I think they're short-sighted, and it impacts the long-term sustainability of the organization, and hence the objective is shifting towards social responsibility. Higher volatility in the stakeholder confidence. Now the stakeholders, considering the kind of a risk that the organizations are exposed to and it impacts them in a big way, the confidence is shaking, and the stakeholders, the board members, all the audit committee members, and the people who are investing into the organization, they are not able to keep calm for a while, and you could see the reflection of this in the share price of any particular organization. The moment any external or any internal news which could have a direct or a long-term impact on an organization, immediately you could see a reflection in the share price of a particular company in the stock market. What it is just a reflection of the high volatility it has in the stakeholders' confidence. Now, having seen these, if you see how it is impacting the risk, the complete risk portfolio which we have been traditionally focusing while we do the internal audit is taking a big shift. If you see some of these, the fraudster have access to more and more data now. Earlier, and this is more dangerous because in this manner we can say that the fraudster is become more smart. They know what's happening as a process and is aware of the information around it, and hence the controls needs to be more and more preventive. And I emphasize this second time in my speech, and I'll drill down more in detail. Gone are the days when we're thinking about the detective controls. This is the time where we have already moved from detective to preventive, but it's the time that we have to move from preventive to the proactive controls, so be able to prevent all these frauds in a much timely manner. Now we look at social media. Now employees in social media, now that's an area. Earlier this organization were not exposed to the social media. Now when today, think of a situation when a particular employee gives a statement on a social media over which the organization may not have any control. Can you imagine the quantum of the risk that an organization can be exposed to? Now, those are the areas which we as an internal auditor needs to shift our focus to. Higher interconnected dependency coupled with lower controls. The very good example that I just mentioned about BYOD. Now, everything is interconnected: digital, finance, business process, and the operations. All things are interconnected. But because of any external or internal environment, if the organization is required to lower the control environment, how we as an internal auditor can suggest the compensating control so that they are prevented from any big risk. Compromising segregation of duties under the COVID, we just talked about. Financial instability because of the volatility around the organization and become more financial unstable. So those are the areas where we can focus in. And hence, if we look at collectively, our role may be changing, but the expectations have not changed. I would say overall, the expectations from the internal auditor has significantly enhanced. And since the expectations from the auditor has significantly enhanced, we need to do some changes in our knowledge, the way we perform the audit, the way we leverage our technology for the purpose of doing our job, we need to change all these areas so that we are able to do justice with what we are expected to perform our audits and meet the expectations from us as a fraternity of the internal auditor. Now, if we move next, if we see, I would want to, we have seen that what's changing in the world around us. Now, let us see, we as an auditor, when we use the audit techniques, what changes has come in the different audit techniques over a period of time. And if we take a pause on this slide, I have divided this entire slide into 3 portions. The first portion talks about the different technology which the business has adopted from time to time. There were technologies which have diminished, almost diminished. There are technologies which are maturing, and there are emerging technologies, and I will say by now all of these have already been adopted by most of the large and medium organizations, but very soon many other organizations will also adopt it. And we look at the journey. So there were days when the calculators were being used, the initial days. The spreadsheets came into the picture. The businesses started using data analytics for the purpose of business and identify where they need to invest, what are the areas of the product launch, what are the new things that they can launch into the market which can help them increase their revenues and the profit margins. They were started using the data analytics. The new system applications got implemented. We started about the accounting softwares got into the picture. The initial spreadsheets, we talk about the Lotus Notes, Excel applications, Microsoft applications, various other applications started coming to the picture. Gone are the days when they had the projector-based slideshows. The people moved from those days to the PowerPoint presentations, and the standalone enterprise systems were being used. As we see in the last decade or a half, we'll say the organizations moved to client server networking. So the server and the different client systems, they start interacting with the server so that it helps the remote working of the organizations. So the businesses have the corporate office and the various branch office and the plant locations. Because of the client server networking, everything could come on a single platform and they could start interacting easily. So the emails came into the picture, remote connectivity increased, internet was introduced, so it has brought the business world more closer. The physical distances started reducing. The ERP systems connected with the remote server architecture further enhanced the effectiveness of all the systems. So these were the technologies that got introduced. But by now, all these technologies are there, but they are pretty mature. Even the smaller organization, even you look at the startups that came into the picture, they would start using all these technologies right from the day one. And now the organizations have moved towards more and more emerging technologies. They started using cloud computing, this new word, so that irrespectively, whenever they change, the businesses, their processes, their systems, their data is not impacted. It's all there on the cloud, so nothing is lost. Robotic process automation, mundane repeated tasks that were being done by the human bodies are getting deputed to the bots. They have started taking the place. The bots start, chat bots. While you go to any insurance site, any e-commerce site, you need not call up the help desk. There are chat bots to give you the first level resolution. Those are getting implemented. The businesses have started using AI, machine learning, and big data analytics to identify the consumer pattern and what do you need. So if you go on any Google website and start looking at any best of the rates of a hotel, if you are planning your trip, the moment you go on any other website or any other e-commerce site, the website itself is able to identify your pattern, what have you done as a recent searches, and then start giving you more and more suggestion. This is a very classic example of a combination of an ML plus big data analytics. To be able to move up in the ladder and make information more secure, blockchain as a technology has got introduced. Organizations have started using artificial intelligence and the context awareness, as the best of the technologies. The moment you make ones, and depending on the context around the consumer, your website changes your shape. They start recommending the best of the options to your consumer. And the general purpose machine language are some of the example where the business has moved very fast. And alongside, if we see the way the business communication is happening, that has also changed. Earlier, the letter, hard copy documents were being used. Later on, the emails came into the picture. The desktops were replaced by the laptops and the smartphones. Audio visual communication increased. soft copy documentation increased, and the internet started being used by the organization, and the data sharing became more and more easy. If we see now, today the emails are there. High-speed laptops have made all these cognitive technologies as an easy implementation, as an easy adoption by all the businesses. The smart tools, the audiovisual communication have taken as an advantage. OCRs and the natural language processing has become very normal and very common tools for all the businesses, and the high-speed internet with the data sharing has made all these technologies as a easy adoption by all the businesses, and they're using it. Now, why we are talking about it? See, we as an internal auditor, and below this, I have also mapped the various audit techniques that were being used by the auditors from time to time. While we have seen that the business has matured from calculator to the machine learning, we also as an auditor needs to match up pace with that so that we are able to do justice what we are doing. We start from the very basic techniques of the inspection, physical verification, inquiry, observation, and the examination that we were doing. We still do it, but those were the techniques that was the most prevalent, most effective in the initial days, but those are less being used. Today, this is now getting replaced from the data analytics. Data analytics were also there earlier, but earlier it was more spreadsheet based, hard copy based, complex data analytics. Later on, the better data analytics applications came into being, like Excel and all. Today we have very advanced tool to do the data analytics and then present the outcome of this data analytics in such an effective manner to be able to conclude the results very effectively. And I'll show you some of the examples in the subsequent slides in a while. Computer assisted audit techniques. Earlier it was used very in a very limited manner, but today this is the way of doing the audit itself. This is something that we need to audit. System walkthrough and the configuration. Since everything is being done through the system, there are hardly any processes which are manual. Now this is very important that when we go as an internal auditor, do the system walkthrough and the configuration, see whether there is any risk that the system is not configured appropriately, and there is any logical controls which needs to be implemented. A very classic example, and I will take very basic examples, not a typical one. In a P2P, we talk about the purchase order being raised. What are the logical controls when the ERPs are being used that the GRN will be done correctly, whether the invoice processing will be done correctly, and whether the payments will be done correctly by matching the PO, GRN, invoice, and the quality match. But today, if we talk about, the organizations are moving towards the robotic for the purpose of invoice processing and the payment. So when nobody in person is doing those three-way match and system is doing the three-way match, I think this is high time that we as an internal auditor needs to upgrade our skill and see how do we audit that bot who is actually doing the invoice processing to be able to see whether there is any configuration problem. And I'll give you a very classic example. At one of our clients, we see that they implemented bot for the purpose of invoice processing and payment processing, but later on, 2 months down the line, they realized that in particular scenario for a certain category of the invoices, it was doing double posting. Now that didn't came across in the UAT, that didn't come across in the sample scenario that got tested, but it was a very peculiar transaction. Certain scenario it was doing double posting. Can you look at the risk, the gamut of the risk? Think of the inherent risk that we carry as an internal auditor, that if such transactions do not come in our sample and tomorrow a large financial fraud happens because of that, we may be questioned. So are we equipped, or are we changing our audit technology, audit techniques in a manner that we are able to audit these technologies as well and see whether those are configured properly as a business rule, either intentionally or unintentionally? And then come into the picture using all these technologies, the AI, RP, and remote access tools for the purpose of audit and then as an audit tool. And we'll deep dive. So today, this is something as an area that we can use. We can use these technologies equally to do more effective audits. So that's been the journey. Now, having understood all this, now we need to see what digital disruption is bringing for the auditors, how it helps us, and how does it requires us to transform the way we were doing the conventional audits. Now I've divided this into 4. The first is what is changing in the focus of what to audit, and then where to do the audit, and then how do we perform this audit, and also equally important, who would perform the audit. And when I say who, that doesn't mean that we as an internal auditor. Now it is I'm focusing on what skill set that we need to change, or what skill set that we need to acquire to be able to do this audit. Now I'll start from what to audit. Now, the first point is connect with what might be not just what it is. We as an auditor go and do the analytics and perform the data analytics on the past data, do the post-mortem and see what's gone wrong. Now, our focus has not to be on what it is. Our focus has to move from what it is to what it could be. Now, today, I'll give you a very classic example. There are a lot many organizations which were largely 95% on their physical retail shops and had a very small portion of the e-commerce as a website. Now, if we go and audit that kind of an organization, we would always see that, okay, look at a materiality concept and focus more on the physical inventory movements, because that's contributing to 95% of the business. But imagine the way the world is changing as a digital, that 5% business would eventually, just not more than a couple of years, would grab 80% of their business share. Now, if we do not focus in a timely manner on that 5% of the business, what harm it could do to the organization. So we need to focus on what is the future risk for the organization and set the right controls well in time for this organization. Having said that, we need to see, while we use the machines which are good at simulating the things but not at being. Something which machines can't do, that's where we have to bring in our expertise as internal auditor. We have to focus on things that machines can't automate or machines can't audit. Still, there would be some portion of cash handling being done by the organization. At the end of the day, inventory movement would be physically done by the organizations. Though I understand that drones have also come into the picture, but still majority, many inventory movements will still be physical. Those are the areas that while we use the technologies for the purpose of analysis, for the purpose of analyzing the trends, outliers, and suggest better of the recommendations, but we have to use our skills to focus on things that cannot be automated, because the risk of losing the value for the organizations also lies there. Logic built in the apps and systems handling the information. We have not just to audit the information, we have to also audit the logics built into the apps and the systems that is going to handle this information. In a while, I'll just take an example of an ERP based purchase transaction. Another example, when we taken I came across, I'm working for an organization, they are using chatbots to solve the customer problems. Now it's a complete end-to-end automated process wherein any new person goes to their website, buys their subscription, and to be able to start doing their business from the website. And they also have a chatbot to resolve their queries. Now the consumers' patience has also gone down. If they are facing some problem while they are going to buy your product online, if they get the immediate solution, then that's good. Otherwise, they have a tendency to quickly shift to the competition. And hence, the organization had implemented the chatbot to provide the solutions to the queries with them. But the limitation with best of the technologies is that they perform based on certain rules. So the chatbot is configured with the predefined rules for the purpose of providing that solution. Now, even if we are not technically equipped as an internal auditor to go and look at the code of the chatbot, but still we as an internal audit can go and look at the rules that are configured for the chatbot. Can't we even analyze the past trend and see what are the top problems that are being faced by the users while they go on the website, and whether the chatbot is configured to provide the resolution to all the top problems? Very basic examples. And when I did this, I identified there were at least 3-4 very common problems that were not configured there. Now, those are the areas where we need to change our audit programs and start performing the audits. When we move from what to audit to where to audit. So when we look at from where to audit, the focus is moving from the physical boundaries. Now increase focus in the system, environment, media, and people handling the information, not just the information, because that's where the complete, once again. So where to audit? So now we have not to just look at the information. We have to look at the system which is processing this information, whether the system has adequate controls so that these controls are able to mitigate any risk. Anybody trying to play with the system, they are able to mitigate that. The companies have moved from tele to best of the ERPs. So we have to audit the systems and the environment around it. We have to see the virtual and remote locations. These people are not physically working on ground, but they are working remotely. So wherever they are working, so minimum on-site presence. How do we look at that? The adequate controls are there so that the organization is not exposed to those risks. Shared service centers. Now, this is the latest trend. In the last decade, you would have seen a lot of the organizations have set up the shared service centers for their deliveries. Finance and accounts teams have become central. Now, we may be going to the factory sites, we may be going to the branch sites and looking at some of the transactions, but the majority of the risk may be lying at the shared service centers. Now, that's where this shift has moved from the traditional focus to the new locations where the business is getting conducted. We have to move our focus to those places and focus those for the audit. While we do that, we need to see how do we perform the audit. Now that's more important, the software development life cycle. Now this is the first point that I have kept in. Now we were talking about moving from detective to preventive, from preventive to proactive ways of doing the audit. Now software development life cycle, we have to start doing the audit while this software is getting built, while the organization. I take an example of the board. Now that resulted into the duplicate payment and the duplicate parking of the liability only because there was no auditing done while the software getting built. The company was in a hurry of just making a bot and implement it for the purpose of reducing some manpower, save some cost, and make the business process more effective. And by the time they call me as an internal auditor, there would be huge losses that could have accrued to the organization. So we need to equip ourselves and start auditing while that is getting built. We need to start reviewing those system documentations, business blueprints, UAT documentations, and give our recommendations around that, whether the SDLC is being followed properly, so that eventually the risk is not there and it is detected later on. By that time, there are a lot of loss that has already happened to the organization. So we need to move our shift from the preventive to even proactive basis. Intelligent audit using AI and cognitive technologies. I'll drill down more on this, but we have to perform our audit using best of these technologies so that we are able to identify more and more risk and become more effective in our process. Robotic process automation for the mundane repetitive activities. Take an example of doing the branch audits repeatedly throughout the year for 25 branches. Why can't we just have a bot prepared and they do most of the repeated tasks that we do as an audit? And in a while, I'll show you some of the demos around it. But if I just share some experience, we have seen more than 70% of the audit activities could also be performed using the bots, and that's where it can significantly enhance the effectiveness of our community as internal auditor. And whatever time we save, that could be used for more strategic thinking and do more strategy based audits for the organization. Go real time rather and provide continuous assurance to the organization rather than just doing the post-mortem. And that is possible only when we start using technology for the purpose of audit and provide greater reliance on the data, because the quantum of data itself has become too huge. And we continue doing the traditional way the audit being done. Those 25, 50 or 100 samples are no way going to help us identify the avenues where the auditor or the organization needs to focus, and hence have to significantly enhance the usage of data analytics. I won't say start using the data analytics because that's the history already. I would say significantly enhance the usage of data analytics for the purpose of audit. Having said that, what do we need to do the changes in the audit team? Who would perform the audit? We need to focus on human only trait and leave other things to the technology and the machines. Creativity, imagination, critical thinking, work with the board and the audit committees in the strategy building activities. And I'm sure the new you would have read the new 3 lines model that also asks we as an internal auditor to work in a more collaborative and a consulting way with the second line of defense and the first line of defense. That's where we have to use our creative and the critical thinking and share experience with the management to have more proactive approach and build a better robust strategies for the organization. Combination of varied skill, we have been talking about having team of a combination of a finance expert, technology expert, data scientist, and everyone as a part of the team. But I would say world is moving from a combination of these skills as a team to every auditor having a flavor of all these skill set. And hence I would say that even if we are a finance expert, we need to equip ourselves to understand some bit of a technology, so that whatever we see, we are able to fairly understand how the business processes are done. And we need to have a flavor of all these skill sets getting acquired as one person as well. So that's where the world is moving to. And using the bots, AI and ML enabled apps for the purpose of audit and mobile workforce. We need to have a very agile. We can't just continue moving with the static team force that we have. We as auditor also needs to have a very fair balance of we as a fraternity have our revenues and the cost, and hence mobile workforce is another aspect which is getting used. If you want to call for an expert, we typically call as an SME. There are ways you go to the websites and hire those expertise as a part of your team, and you continue doing it. I'll give you a very classic examples. You go and start auditing for an oil and gas company, any complex engineering based organization, any core technology based organization. We may be finance expert, we may be knowing, we may be fraud expert, we may be process expert, but we may not have the best of the expertise in the engineering domain. We go to the crowdsourcing and just do a quick outsourcing with someone who has the expert knowledge on that particular domain, and we can work together as a team. And those are the traits that we have to become more and more agile to, and have changed our methodology so that we are able to quickly do that and be able to take up those engagements and perform the internal audit. So those are some of the changes that's we need to do collectively as we approach any internal audit engagement. I would want to quickly touch upon now the smart and digital internal audit approach. Those are some of the changes that has happened, but collectively we see, having touched all those aspects, how can we have a glimpse of 360 degree coverage in a smart and digital approach. Smart analytics we have spoken about. We need to have for more comprehensive and deep dive comfort and assurance to the organization. Eye of forensic, we have spoken about this. It's very paramount that we as an internal auditor also needs to have the eye of forensic, not with the intent of going that any fraud has happened and looking at everything with a suspicion, but importantly looking at whether all the fraud risk mitigating controls are there in the process. So proactively looking at strengthening the control environment around it. While we focus that optimizing the ERP controls and the automation efficiencies which can come to the organizations, more as detective as well as while we look at the technologies that they are using, what are the logical control lapses into it, also giving them as a consultative role. And I'm again touching upon the 3 lines model that from the IIA has come in, the new 3 lines model, where we look at the collaborative and the consultating approach. I'm sure the board and the audit committees are expecting us to provide recommendations for the long-term automation efficiencies for the organization. Operational auditing goes without saying. We need to have the sector insights, and as where I thought key who to audit, we need to have the collaborative team so that we are able to bring those sector insights for the organizations. Focus on the internal control. Cost optimizations, very important. I think we have always been talking about controls and always given a lesser focus on the cost of the controls. I think that's also an area when we search the controls, we also have to keep in mind how it is more cost effective and look at the areas where the cost could be reduced for the organizations for the long-term sustainability for the organizations. And alongside, we have to work with the multidisciplinary team and the SMEs to be able to justice to the business processes. While we do that, the compliance goes without saying. The change in the shift is, earlier we used to do compliance as one of the audit areas. So take an example, any organization call us and see, okay, please do the statutory compliance review for me. Now, I'm sure those 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks kind of an engagement, you won't be able to look at all the compliance requirements. Important is how we as an internal auditor focus on the legal compliance framework, the methodology and the approach that the organization has to strengthen their second line of defense to proactively identify the changing rules and regulations and be able to ensure the compliance to those changing rules and regulations at their own. That's one. Number two, while we do any area as internal audit, in parallel we see whether the adequate compliance has been ensured by the organization. Just a while I was giving an example of an e-commerce organization, and I was just doing their customer onboarding process. Now that has nothing to do with the compliance, but I realized that the government had come out with the new e-commerce rule that had a big impact in that process. And that's where when we have to start doing the audit, looking at compliance, digital and a financial angle all together while we look at any of the process. And on top of it, management auditing, if we have to strengthen the tone at the top, the governance, how do we look at the people, process, technology, the all three pillars of the governance together. That's an area we have to have a focus, and that's an area where the internal auditor also needs to work with the management while the strategies are getting built in, provide their suggestions and the recommendations for more appropriate policies and the procedures that the board is going to set for the organization for the long-term sustainability. And on a continuous basis, while we do the internal audit engagements, provide our suggestions for the regular improvement in those entity level controls and the policies and the procedures for the organization. Now that's the 360-degree approach, the digital approach that we can have for the purpose of internal audit. Now I will start deep diving some of the peculiar aspects of the technology that we can use as an internal auditor. And just after this, I will show you the demo of the bot also for the purpose of internal audit. But before that, I just want to set the bedrock. What can a bot do? At a very high level, in a very simple terms, there are 9 traits that I have captured here, that what can bot do, and you can equally relate that how can we use these traits for the purpose of internal audit. So bot can read documents like a human being reading the documents. If it's just a scanned document, it has the OCR facilities. It may be Word file, PDF file, or an image file. It can read the documents at its own. It can extract the data from the various systems that the organizations are using. It can maintain the documentation trail, so perform the analysis, maintain the documentation trail, and whatever way we prepare our audit work papers, it can store that. It can perform the data analytics as a part of the audit lifecycle itself. It can perform reconciliations, tally the data from the various sources that it gathers. You can implement if then else rules, because no process is as simple. There would be conditions. You can configure those conditions so that while the bot is reviewing the information, it can follow that. It can have the APIs and the connectors built to connect to the various systems that the organization is using. Some information you may need to scrap from the website or the internet portals. Some information you may want to extract from the backend, or some information you may want to extract from the various other systems that the organizations are using. But the bot has a capability to sit on top of it, talk to all the systems through the APIs, and pull up the information. It can even go to the extent of draft the report, so that you will come across, you can overcome the challenges that we face while the different people drafting the report and it's not consistent. So the predefined programming can be there, and then it can share the reports to the various stakeholders for the purpose of getting the comments or issuing the final reports. And alongside, it will continue maintaining the complete repository for the complete audit trail. Now, if we just see all these 9 traits at once, now these are something that we as audit techniques, or when we do any audit, we use for the purpose of audit. And if we weave all these traits in a logical sequence, believe me, it can help you performing all the repeated activities as a checklist that we do for the purpose of an audit, and spare time for the internal auditor to focus on what's changing and what is more strategic, for which is more repetitive in nature, and do more justice to the role that we play for the organization. So what I will do, I will before we move ahead, I think I would just want to show one of the couple of POCs, how the bot is able to do the audit. Just 1 second. So this is a bot.
Variance analysis bot
I will take a pause and set up the context first. So this is a bot which is prepared for the purpose of analyzing the logistic cost, both in terms of the price per kilometer, taking the fuel cost, as well as the number of kilometers distance that a particular truck is traveling, by taking the information from the Google map and see that a particular organization on a particular trip, what is charged as a multiplication of the kilometers that the truck has traveled, as well as the fuel price, and then what is prevailing, actually taking the information from the IOCL website, what is the fuel price, and then what is the actual number of kilometers that the Google is showing between point A and point B, and what should be the total cost, and what are the variances. And each of these activities, the bot is using the organization's internal information and the information available on the websites in the public domain, and performing the complete analysis. So have a look at this.
by the user. Bot logs into ERP system using predefined login credentials to extract and save the cost report in specified folder location. Bot sanitizes the data by eliminating spaces, hyphen, colon, etc. under column name vehicle number. Bot opens the CN report and initiates reading for specific data fields. Bot opens cost report and initiates reading for calculating the following variances. 1. Trip variance. 2. Cost variance.
The
3.
volume is not
Profitability variance.
video is, yeah.
Bot prepares trip, cost, and profitability variance sheet by creating additional columns.
So this is here you will see that the bot is preparing the worksheet.
Bot extracts daily fuel price data from IOCL official website into an Excel file.
So you will see that the bot is going to the external website of IOCL and scrap the data to see what is the live price.
Bot extracts the distance between two locations from Google Maps into the trip variance Excel sheet.
So this is how the bot is extracting what is the distance from the Google map.
Bot adds 20% to the Google Map distance as the tolerance limit and calculates the difference between the Google Maps distance and distance as per report.
So taking some tolerance limit because there could be some unseen contingency. So taking a tolerance of 20% and then identifying the variance.
Bot tags cases with negative percentage under column name status as a red flag and positive percentage as a pass. Bot calculate the fuel cost based on the following parameters. 1. Actual kilometer run. 2. Vehicle size. 3. Vehicle average. 4. Average fuel consumption. 5. Fuel price from IOCL.
I hope the video is visible and audible. To let me know, I can share again.
Bot calculates percentage of excess fuel cost incurred under column name, difference percentage. Bot tags cases with negative percentage under column name status as a red flag and positive percentage as a pass.
So I'll move it little fast for the repeated transactions. So as you see that it has compared the kilometers, applied the price, and then again wherever the claimed cost is within the tolerance, it is saying fast, and for others it is saying the test is failed for the purpose of the next level analysis by the auditor.
Bot calculates the total days, distance in KMS and total cost incurred from report and total income from CN report to update gross margins. Bot identifies cases with negative value under column name gross margins and tags the same as loss under column name status. Alternatively, positive values are tagged as profits.
Now, if you see, look at the power of the bot. Now, these are the repeated tasks. If you deploy any team member, I'm sure he would take at least couple of days to go through that number of transaction, and that too also on a sample basis. And all this can be done by the bot in just 1 or 2 hours. More importantly, bot is something that can work throughout the day.
Analysis complete.
My team can work only from 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning, maybe 6 p.m. in the
Bot
evening.
opens and update variance analysis report.
It is drafting the report.
Variance analysis report updated.
Now it will mail to the stakeholders.
Bot opens Outlook to send the exception cases Excel and variance analysis report to the concerned team members.
Now it is sending the report, drafting the email. And believe me, all this could be easily configured in the bot, and it has an element of AI as well. It can identify who's the process owner, that list can be maintained, and on a dynamic basis, it will send that report to the concerned stakeholder and seek the comments.
Mail sent successfully.
So there are various other POCs. What I will do while I circulate this presentation later, I will circulate this list as well. So the point which I was saying is this is the power of the bot that we all can use as an internal auditor and then focus on what matters the most. Another point that I was emphasizing is that, see, technology is something that can operate 24 hours a day. My team may be working 8 hours, 10 hours, and not continuously for 12 hours a day. But bot is something that can do this task repetitively, more efficiently in terms of time, and then for at various locations at particular point in time. And it can also help provide assurance at much more frequency to all the stakeholders than our initial frequency. So take an example, we may be taking an audit for once in a year or twice in a year. The same audit can be repeatedly done every month by using the bot, and hence it gives time, it takes the effectiveness of the internal audit to the next level. Also, it gives time for the internal auditor to the risks that were not perceived earlier. Those are not repetitive in nature, and then see how do we mitigate the organization from having those risks exposing them to. So that's one area that bot can be so helpful. Now, having understood that we can use all these technologies for the purpose of an audit, I just want to demonstrate a high-level model of remote working, because see, this has already become new normal, and even if the pandemic stabilize and we continue our normal operations, we will have to become more and more efficient and effective, and this would become the need of the hour that we continue to work in a more remote audit manner. Now we look at this typical model. On the left hand side we have the auditee, the process owners. Alongside we have the information, because information, I'm not calling process owner as the only source of information. Gone are the days when we used to raise the initial data request. The process owner used to send me the information over email and we were doing the audits. Today we need to have our interfaces built directly from their servers, ERPs, data lakes that they have, fetch the information, perform the analytics, and seek only the information which is available from the process owners, so that we are able to respect their time as well. You would always remember that the people complain that, okay, every time you come and do the audit, we have to do the business as well. And that's how we have to become more and more effective and respect each other's time and still do the role more effectively. When we move on the next slide, then we have the audit team who is working remotely. I have divided the complete audit team setup in two. So you will see the on-site team, which is a very lean team. See, because for some interaction or for some audit checks, you won't need to visit. But the idea is not to replace the in-person audit completely. Idea is to take up the learnings, whatever could be done remotely, perform it remotely in an effective manner, make better use of your team, and do the audit effectively, and then give the results to the stakeholders. So you have a team who is performing remotely. Data is shared by the bot and data is shared with the audit team as well, because not every task may be performed through bot. So I can understand around 70% of the information can be audited by the bot if the bot implementation is there effectively. And rest of the information could be audited by the team. And once they perform the analysis, they can prepare the draft report, share with the on-site team, who can do some of the revalidation by in-person visits, look at some of the documents in person as well, that somebody has not tried to manipulate with the document while sharing with the team, and then have a better conversation with the team on site and the stakeholders on site, and finalize the report and share with the reporting authority. So that's the high level model with which remote auditing can be enabled. And this slide demonstrates the complete engagement life cycle. How can that be performed leveraging all these tools? So be it the knowledge, taking the business knowledge, performing the audit planning, gather the information for the purpose of audit, perform the audit analytics by various tools and technologies, perform the in-field execution for the sample documentations, prepare the audit report and share with the auditor. While we perform this complete life cycle, there are various tools and technologies that can be used to enable remote auditing. And none of this is too costly or gone are the days that were required to be purchased. This is something which is readily available and we are using in a day in day out manner and can be very effectively used for the purpose of an audit. But important is how we are using these technologies for the effective audit. And what do I mean by that? We need to have a very clear understanding for the effective usage of these technologies. So take an example, if you have to just share an information or the report which the other person may see only once or twice in a day, you could use email as a method of communication. However, if you want to do little more frequent conversation, you may use chat as an option. But if the conversation has to be more effective, you need to explain your point of view and immediately understand the other person's points of view. You need to move on to the telephonic conversation, and to understand the perspective, or if you need to see certain things as well, you need to move to the webinar form or the video conferencing. And definitely, having said all that, none of this could replace the effectiveness of in-person audit. So wherever it's required, you could take the help of on-site team to go in person and look at certain aspects. So the key lies in how do we use these technologies for what purpose? And if we use all these technologies effectively with an appropriate purpose and in a planned and disciplined manner, it can do wonders to the way you do the audit and still meet the requirement and the expectation which an internal audit is expected to deliver to all the stakeholders. And over this, I want to quickly show. So in the hindsight, we see okay, how much we can do the internal audit, but there's a careful study that is being done, and all these numbers that I have plotted is on the basis of a detailed study of a detailed checklist of a typical organization, that if the organization has all the information available in a digital manner, systems are there, the accesses are given to the auditor, this is the extent of the remote audit which is possible. So certain areas be 95%, certain areas could go to 90%. The areas like account and finance, we could do 95%. Safety and security, definitely an area which requires in-person visits. So maybe around 60% is an average numbers. Procure to pay kind of an area could be done 95%. So broadly 80 to 90% of the audit checks could be performed remotely if the information is available in a soft form and provided to the auditor. So that's the extent with which the remote audit could be so effective. Now this is a slide that I have kept just to give you a glimpse while we have looked at the theory, but specifically if we pick some of the examples, the change in the focus that we need to bring in when we do the on-ground audit. So traditionally on the left hand side, I have the traditional audit checks. What was the risk rating? What shift in the focus that it has brought to the organizations that I have carried in the right hand side, and what out of this is auditable remotely and not auditable, and accordingly we have derived that percentages also in the previous slide that you would have seen. And I will just take some of the examples. So take an example of the vendor selection. Now earlier it was a techno-commercial evaluation that we used to see, but today as the vendors are getting onboarded in a more and more automated manner, the risk is still high, but we need to focus on all the new vendors selected, how they got onboarded. And I remember there are organizations which have very limited interface in onboarding the vendor, and if the system do the comparative analysis and it just onboards. So we need to focus, those are the areas which could be more vulnerable than any typical random sampling, and see whether the techno-commercial evaluation was there or not. The areas where the segregation of duties has diluted, we need to go and do the substantive testing, whether those are vulnerable to the fraud, or the compensating controls are there or not. Because of the COVID, a lot of changes that has happened back to reduce the touch and the physical handling of the material, whether those are the areas where the physical checking or the extent of checking has reduced, and it could impact the incorrect counting or the quality checks for the material. The three-way match, now the boards are doing the three-way match, whether the delegation of authority is appropriately followed by the system is performing this, and those are the areas that needs to be focused than just a random three-way match of the DOA. Maintenance of the inventory stock levels, the last one I say. So the maintenance of the stock levels, we go as an internal auditor and used to see whether the stock levels are maintained there or not. Now how does the process has become more efficient? We need to see whether the organization is even renegotiating the terms with their vendors, and rather than having their working capital blocked, Are we asking them to have the inventory maintained on a consignment basis, or have we automated the process so that the min-max levels are also dynamic? Today, the organizations have moved to the dynamic credit limit. So not a fixed credit limit. As the performance improves, so like for the customer, we have our credit card limits changing, we have the dynamic credit limits being used. Similarly, in the inventory, we could have the dynamic minimum maximum levels so that we do not run out of the stock, as well as parallelly reducing the working capital for the organization. So some of the areas, some of the examples where the shift has happened, and all this could be auditable remotely largely. But yes, wherever you need to go and do the physical verification of the material and the aspects, still will have to rely on the in-person audit. So I would like, before I go to the question and answer, I would like to end the presentation with this last slide, and I want to take you on a journey. So this is something which has happened till now, but think of a situation 5 years, 4 years down the line. What could be the life of a chief audit executive? How would you be doing playing a role, moving the controls from detective to preventive, preventive to proactive manner, and helping strengthening the both first line of a defense as well as second line of a defense. Now I'll take you a journey. 7 a.m. the chief audit executive wakes up. There's a mobile alert, and in that mobile alert, because in the back end there will be a bot who would be doing the control testing, preparing a dashboard, and sets an alert. So he looks at the alert that, okay, what is the control health of the organization of the transaction that got performed on the previous day. While he's getting ready and going to his office, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., he gets an alert on his mobile of a possible control breach, that somebody is trying to play with some of the controls. And I've taken an example here that somebody tries to split up a payment transaction to bypass the approval requirement of a payment, so that in his authority itself, it can process the payment, because the payment itself is automated. It directly gets processed and goes to the bank for the auto payment. Now that kind of a split is there, but the bot was smart enough. It could identify it. It could trigger the alert to the CRC, chief audit executive. He could see that it's a fraud risk. Immediately on a click of a button, it could trigger the detailed investigation. There is a team already sitting in his office. On receiving that approval from the chief audit executive, the person goes, looks at that transaction, looks at the hard copy documentation, and see whether there actually is a split or somebody has tried to bypass the control environment. Audit manager confirms it, yes, it is there. Immediately the chief audit executive triggers the notifications to the finance team to do the stop payment to the bank. So while the payment has just got authorized, the bank would have not processed it. The payment gets stopped. In parallel, the chief audit executive triggers to the security to do the blocking, to block this physical ID, so that the person who has tried to do it is not able to move out. The security receives that alert and blocks it, and the person, while trying to go out of the office, doesn't get the access. So it's withheld by the security for the further investigation. By 1 p.m. so this is something on a particular transaction. Proactively it could stop it, but by 1 p.m. we are ready to further strengthen the control environment. Chief audit executive calls up a meeting with the finance teams, look at what are the flaws in the control framework, mutually agrees on an alternative and the compensative control that gets configured in the bot. Again, the control testing gets performed, and by 5 p.m. the new control health dashboards gets published. Now look at the fast pace with which even the internal audit can perform, and on a proactive basis can support the organization and the stakeholders, so that the value is not eroded at the end, and we are not later on questioned that we are just doing the post-mortem, and what the value as internal auditor we can bring on the table to protect the value or to generate the value for the organization. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much for patient listening, and I'm sure this is quite helpful to you, all of you. And we can now open the lines for question and answer, and happy to take the questions which you may have. Thanks a lot, everyone. So
thank you so much, Mohit. I think Sana will be picking up some questions that we may have received. And to all the participants, if there are any questions, you can type it in the chat box.
Sir, meanwhile, I'm just asking for the feedback poll, and you can ask, participant can ask question as well. I'm just launching the poll questions.
Sure. So all the participants on their screen, they can click on the option, give a feedback. And in the meantime, Sana, if there are any questions, you can also raise that to Mohit. And in fact, we have Sumitji also there. So we can pick those questions.
Sure, sir. We received one question. Mohit, the question is, as the organizations are moving to digital way, in the expectation from internal auditors to switch to digital or robotic audit, and is it expected from internal auditor to advise on RPA?
I must say, Sana, that's a very good question, and I tried giving a flavor to this in the presentation itself. I think very much. But believe me, see, as far as expectations are concerned, definitely. And I took an example of one of my client where the organization had implemented the bot since there were no proper verifications done. And in certain scenarios, it was parking duplicate payable entries. Definitely the auditor is expected to look at all these technologies and advise them whether those are configured properly and whether all the risks are mitigated there. But on the parallel side, I will say it's high time that we as internal auditor need to enhance our skill set to be able to do that. And I also talked about how do we do that, that we need to start auditing during the SDLC itself to proactively do that. But yes, if it's not done, it's definitely very much the ask, and we need to advise the management on all these RPS or all other cognitive initiatives that the organizations are taking. So hope that answers, and thank you. That's a very good question. That's the need of the hour.
Thanks, Mohit. Another question which we received is, the pandemic caused the biggest disruption across industries. How well are the organization able to adapt and respond to the risk with business continuity services?
I think by now, so I will answer this in two phases. The pandemic, when it started impacting the organization, yes, initially 1 month, 2 months, all were skeptical about it. We were thinking, how would we cope about it? And I've seen the days where a lot of organizations had stopped the internal audit activities for a while because they wanted to focus on business first and see that the business is continuing. But I think we as a fraternity, as an internal auditor, immediately pitched up to the management and suggested what are the alternative ways of doing it, sensitize them that if they ignore the parallel internal audit or internal control activities, how it could impact them, make them vulnerable for the controls. So that's one piece. By now, I will say most of the organizations have realized. You would hardly see any of the organization that are not sensitized enough of the damage it could bring with the organization. They are able to cope up. And on the parallel side, equally valuing the role that the internal audit has played and stood up with the boards and the audit committees in these times in suggesting them the alternative and the compensating controls to have a proper balance, that the business continue to be operated in an effective manner, and the internal auditor also plays an important role so that the exposure around the fraud risk gets reduced. And so that's how it's being there, and that's how the risk of the business continuity could be reduced.
The following question with this is, how should internal auditor help the business prepare, respond, and remediate crisis to support sustained survival and growth?
So definitely, again, a very beautiful question. For that, I will answer that we have to grow up and take the maturity of the internal audit into the strategy. We were talking about the risk-based audits. We were talking about the transaction-based audits. Then we talk about the risk management-based audits. Now, this is the time where internal audit has to have a place in the strategy building for the organization. And that's where the board and the audit committees needs to look at you as a consultant, as an advisor, while they're building the strategy itself. Now, when we have a place there, then we will have our suggestions and recommendations in improving the policies, procedures, all the critical business decisions that the organization is taking on a proactive basis, and making them aware of the possible pitfalls that it could have because of any wrong decisions. And if those are taken care well in time, and I'm sure we can play a very vital role in reducing the risk, in remediating the risk and reducing the future risk that the organization could be exposed to.
This is the last question we have for you for today. How should the internal auditor collaborate with the first and second line model to optimize automation?
Very beautiful question. I think it's the crux of the entire presentation today. So I will answer it again two ways. One is I want to touch upon the three-line model. If you look at the new three-line model of the IIA, it talks about the collaborative and the consultative approach of the internal audit. So no way we can just remain, we say that we are external, we are third line, and you do your activities, then we will come and look at some of the transactions. No, we need to have a consultative approach. And to implement it, so you have two questions. How do we work along with the first and second line, and in a digital way? And I'll give a very classic example. I talked about the software development life cycle. Developing the software, implementing it, and automating the business process is the role of first line and second line. But we as an internal auditor, while the organization is doing it, go there, reviews the business blueprint, still maintaining the dignity of the role that we are playing. I'm not taking the management seat, but on a parallel, reviewing those business blueprints, suggesting them that, okay, these are the certain scenarios that you have not identified while developing this software for your organization. As they move ahead, develops it, do the UAT, again do some of the UATs independently, and reviewing the UATs being done by the organization and commenting in parallel, so that eventually whenever they come out with the digitalized product, it has already catered to some of the risks which the organization may not have foreseen. I think that's a very classic example. How do we actually collaborate with the first line and the second line in a collaborative manner? But other than that, anyways, we have been participating the way. When we look at the SOPs, that's the role where we collaborate with the second line of a defense and suggest, okay, this is the changes in the process that they need to bring into. Whenever we look into the transaction and suggest them as an alternate way, how the controls could be enhanced, that's where we are working with the first line of our defense to strengthen them and improve the the effectiveness of doing a particular transaction. So we have been doing it, but this is how we can do it in a more digital manner. Hope that answers.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mohit, for answering all these questions. Now over to Sid for the formal vote of thanks for today's session.
Thanks, Sana, and thanks, Mohit. I think I'll just add to the three lines model, because that's the talk of the town as well. And if you look at it, we used to have the three lines of defense, and now we have the three lines model. What Mohit you have said is aptly summarizing the change that has come from three lines of defense to three lines model. Sometimes we do confuse and we still want to fall back on it. I think typically we've not shown that slide, but if you look at the new pictorial slide of the three lines model, you will find a horizontal bar which earlier was not there in the three lines of defense model. And that's where I think the expectation as an advisor, if I can say, the internal auditor as an advisor, is also penned down and sketched in the three lines model. So there's one question which I also want to ask you, Mohit, and maybe Sumiji, you can also share, and Sana, you can share. See, a couple of years back, there were prominent talks around robotic process automation, and now we are talking about robotic audit and digital audit and all. The first thing that came to majority of the people's mind in the organization was when this RPA, robotic process, was being talked about, that are human beings. So people, process, and platform, 3 Ps are there. Are we actually wanting to downsize the importance or downsize the role of people? What do you feel when we look at robotic audit or digital audit? Are we somewhere, when we are moving towards the digital role, are we somewhere talking about change or drop in the internal audit professionals that we foresee? And more so when we also talk about the advisory role which the line, the third line is playing in the third line model, along with the first and second, related to that.
So
Mohit,
Sid, very beautiful question, and I will say the answers lies in the history itself. Now, if you look at the days, and we saw that journey from the calculator to AI, when the businesses started adopting all these technologies, believe me, at every milestone, it was getting questioned. Whether are we trying to remove the manpower from the organizations, reduce it, when the ERPs got introduced, when the scanners, barcoding machines got introduced, and the systems got further automated. But I think history has clearly evidenced it, that rather than reducing the importance or the count of people who are supporting managing the businesses has not reduced. In fact, it has increased drastically and significantly. The important is that will always be there, but we have to change our shift. If we continue to do what we were operating to do so far, then I'm sure that our importance may get reduced, because at the end of the day, business is paramount. They have to continue. We have to operate in a very consultative manner, match the pace with the business, equip ourselves, and be able to guide them in mitigating the risk which they are not able to foresee while they are taking these decisions very fast, in the expectation of moving very fast. And I believe it's not only the expectation, I will say that's the need of the hour. That's the need of the hour for the business as well. If they do not change in 3 months, believe me, the competition will change and they will be out of market. And while they are forced to do it, I will say we are also now forced to do it. This no more a choice. Believe me, if we have to be relevant, we have to change ourselves. That's the only thing. But beyond that, internal auditor would always be relevant. In fact, will be even more important if we are able to change our focus, make that shift, and equip ourselves with all these technologies, and be able to do the justice with our role.
thank you so much, Mohit. I think there was
Mohit, we
some problem
received
at my end.
another question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mohit, we received another question. It's for you.
Please.
What
Happy
is
to
the
take.
new skill set that the internal auditors need to acquire? Do we need to learn programming?
Okay, so I will say, I think in the question, the person raised the example also that helps me clarify the intent of the question. That's very important. I won't say not exactly the detailed programming, but believe me, I mentioned about, see, some time back, we used to have the joint team. Having understood that, yes, we need to understand how the technology is advancing, or when we have to audit all these technologies, we need to understand all these aspects, but not necessarily in detail learn the programming, but understand how this work at a high level, and that's very much doable. Believe me, in our curriculum as a chartered accountant, as CIA, we read all this to basically do justice with our role. And I took one example in my presentation of a chatbot, that if we have to do the audit of a chatbot, I'm not saying that we go and look at the coding of the chatbot and then see, whether the chatbot is working effectively or not. But if we are fairly able to understand the methodology or the framework with which all these technologies are developed, the framework of the SDLC, where we have the business blueprints and the UAT documentation, and all the business people maintains this, so they are also not the programmers of the day. So it's only the business logic. And when we match that with the requirement of the business process, we will be able to do the justice. So we have to be aware of be able to do the justice with what we are expected to do. We are not expected to do the coding or do the review of the coding. There may be some complex area there we can take the help of the SME, but not everyone, we as an internal auditor may need to run that path. But fair understanding of some bit of a learning, if we do it, we will be able to do it little more effectively.
Mohitji, you have really worked very hard in this presentation, and the way it's going, it's basically we are going towards a smart internal auditor, which
Right,
is the requirement of the time. And artificial intelligence, robotic automation, all these have become part and parcel of our life. So we need to upscale ourselves, and I think with times we are on the right path. And I think more seminars need to be done on this so that we have more knowledge sharing on this platform. Thank you Siddeshwar ji, thank you Mohit ji, thank you Sana ji, बहुत बढ़िया लगा, बहुत अच्छा रहा. Thank you.
Sana, do you have any more questions or yeah?
No, rest are all appreciations.
Okay, so
thank you so much for your feedback, everyone. Look forward to continue holding more sessions in times to come. Thanks a lot.
So
thanks
so
to
I
all
think
participants also. Thanks to all participants also.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much to all the presidents of the 4 audit clubs, Mohit, Sumitji, Sana, Sameer, and also to Mr. Nikhil Kochar, the Chief Advisor of IA India, who's moderated this session. I think he had to step out, so otherwise he would have done the honors for the vote of thanks. I think it has been a wonderful session, Mohit, right from the journey going almost 1,000 years back, if I can say so. And at that time, it typically used to be Dexterous, and how we have tread the path of transaction audit, risk-based audit, process audit, and going digital. I think Sumiji, you very well summarized that it is the apt word to summarize all of this is smart. So when we talk about digital, we talk about robotics. It has to be smart, and it's like two sides of the same coin. So if you don't use the word smart, it doesn't actually technically mean. Agility has always been there when we talk about auditors or we talk about audit. But how do you make it a bit different? Smart has to have a digital way along with it. I think it was a wonderful session, Mohit, which you took, and I'm sure all the participants also would have enjoyed it. I thank all the participants, and I noticed that from the beginning till almost 10 minutes back till the end, and I know I'm just coming in way of perhaps lunch. So since we do not have a face-to-face, else we would have organized something like that. But I think all the participants were there till the last moment. So I'm sure it was quite enticing for all of them. I wish a very happy Christmas to all the participants, to all the panelists, and have an enjoyable day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.